Again, welcome everyone to another amazing installment of Mussar Mondays. Today's the third week in a row that we're doing here. I'm sitting here in the vaunted Mussar Monday seat, taking over my esteemed brother, Rabbi Wolbe, who's currently in Israel. He'll be back next week. So this is the last opportunity, at least for a couple of weeks, for me to have the privilege and the honor of doing this with y'all. And what I want to do tonight is I want to look at the parsha like we did the previous 2 weeks, and look at the central theme of the parsha, the central mitzvah of the parsha, the eponymous mitzvah of the parsha, and to examine it, and to probe it, and to draw, I think, a fundamental Mussar lesson, a fundamental lesson about life from the parsha that is, again, very broadly applicable, even though said mitzvah is not applicable at all. This week, the parsha is called Parshas Chukas, and the very first mitzvah that we discuss is the mitzvah of the red heifer, of the red cow. Broad strokes of that mitzvah is that you have a cow that's red. It's perfectly red. It's got no white hairs, it's got no black hairs. It was never worked upon the field, didn't have a yoke placed upon it. And you take it to the temple, you slaughter it inside the temple, you bring it outside the temple, you burn it along with a whole mix of other ingredients. Then you have a huge mound of ashes. You take the ashes, you mix them with some water, and then you have a potion that you're going to use to sprinkle twice on people that came into contact with dead people. Those people are called tameh. Tameh means impure, ritually impure. Those people are not allowed to go into the temple, are not allowed to eat sacrifices, are not allowed to participate in some activities. And the only way for them to undo that is to have this red heifer process. So for example, today, if you go to the temple in Israel, Temple Mount in Israel, there's bitch signs everywhere saying, according to Jewish law, it is prohibited for Jews to go onto Temple Mount. The reason for that is specifically this law, because we all came into contact with dead people, either because we touched them, or we were in the same room, or we were in the same hospital as them, or we went to a grave site, or we went near a grave site. We all are considered as if we came in contact with dead people. We are ritually impure, and the only way to undo that, this week's parsha, you have a massive red cow, and you do the whole process with it, and the result is the potion, the formula that is used to sprinkle upon these people. Now that's this week's parsha. Really strange process. And of course there's a lot more details that we're kind of skipping over here, but for example, one of the things that's super counterintuitive is the fact that the person who sprinkles the potion, the ashes of the red cow, the red heifer, on the impure individual himself has to be pure, but then he himself becomes impure. So it's this weird process wherein the recipient, the subject of the red heifer ashes, gets pure, is turned from impure to pure, whereas the conveyor of the red heifer ashes, he is pure, and then he flips to being impure. And the word chukas, the name of the parsha, is a description of a certain kind of law. There's laws, like law is a mitzvah, but there's a certain class of mitzvahs called chok or chukim, and these are mitzvahs that no matter what kind of mental gyrations we invest in understanding, we'll never understand it. In fact, the Talmud tells us only Moshe was given by God the understanding of this mitzvah. Even King Solomon, who was the wisest man that ever lived, he tried all he can, and he couldn't get to the bottom of it. And indeed, there are some other mitzvahs like that. For example, if you go to any Jewish community, you'll find that there's someone in the community who is a shatnez expert. What's shatnez? Well, shatnez, we read a few weeks ago in the parsha, appears twice in the Torah. You cannot wear a garment that's mixed with wool and linen. So if you have a very fancy suit, wool suit, really high-end manufacturer from Italy, sometimes they use linen in the lining, or they use linen in the buttons. Well, that is prohibited to wear by Torah law. You can wear a wool garment, you can wear a linen garment, you just cannot wear a garment that's half wool, half linen. Why? We're not told. That's the law. Take it or leave it, right? That's it. There's no explanation given. And that's a chok, another example of a chok, a mitzvah, that doesn't make sense to us. It's illogical even to us. What's the difference? If linen is okay and wool is okay, well, why is the marriage of the two prohibited, right? What's this whole deal with the red cow? It doesn't make sense to us. It's a chok. It's a decree, an edict of God that we have to obey without understanding. So, yeah.
Is there any commentary on this at all?
There's enough commentary to fill 2 libraries in this.
On the Hoki?
Oh yeah, totally. There's plenty of commentary.
Oh, okay.
But no one gets to the bottom. To the absolute bottom you can't get.
Oh, okay.
In fact, tonight's going to be some commentary on it.
Okay.
So, could you wear a wool jacket with a linen vest?
That's fine. It's not a garment.
As long as they're not. As long as they're not.
It's not one garment, yeah. Okay, so that's the mitzvah. Now, I want to kind of probe this idea. If we can't understand it, and we can't fulfill it, the red heifer mitzvah, is it possible to try to glean some lessons that are very applicable, even though we don't understand it? Maybe another way of saying it: what's the lesson of not understanding? So I want to kind of look at some other places in Jewish literature where the red heifer appears, and to try to find a certain pattern that develops, and use that to build a theme, an insight that is very broadly applicable, and then take that theme and superimpose that upon everything Mussar related, everything Torah related, everything mitzvah related, everything Judaism related, to really take this idea and pull out a core principle that is very broadly applicable. So the first source is from the Talmud, and it's not the place you would expect. It's the Talmud in Kiddushin, and the Talmud in Kiddushin in the 30s, so it begins on page 30, and then 31, 32, 33, there's a discussion about the responsibilities of the children to their parents, and the parents to their children. We know, one of the 10 Commandments, you have to honor your father and your mother. Another mitzvah, you have to fear your father and mother. You have to have respect. You have to have trepidation for your parents. And there's a whole section of Talmud, 4 or 5 pages, discussing all the details of that mitzvah. On page 31a, the Talmud asks the question: how far does it go? What's the extent to which someone needs to honor their father and their mother? And the answer given is very surprising. They tell us, the Talmud does, that it goes as far as Dama ben Nesina. Dama, the first name, the son of Nesina. Who is this Dama ben Nesina? He's a non-Jew, an idolater, who lived in Ashkelon. Today, Ashkelon is one of the major cities on the coast in Israel. It's slightly north of Gaza. And in that same region, thousands of years ago, there was also a city of Ashkelon. And says the Talmud, if you want to know what's the archetype, what's the prototype, what's the personification of how far you need to go to honor your parents, you got to find this Gentile in Ashkelon. He's the example. Well, what's the story? The story goes that he was a diamond dealer, and he dealt precious gems and stones. And one time, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, the breastplate, was missing a stone. And it's a very precious stone, and it's a very unique stone. So they started going to various gem dealers to try to buy a replacement. And one of them was Dama ben Nesina. And the profit he would have made is astonishing. It's 600,000, alternatively 800,000 gold coins. And they come and they knock on the door, and they tell him what they're there for. All the rabbis are there, and they're the emissaries of the court, emissaries of the Kohen Gadol. And he tells them, sorry, I can't do business because my dad, he's taking a nap, and under his pillow is the key to the safe. I can't wake him up because that would be a dishonor to my dad. Go to the next guy. And they pick up and they leave and they go to the next guy, and he loses the deal. That's the story. The Talmud says that, well, how far do you have to go to honor your father and your mother, even if it means forfeiting a huge deal? That's what the Gemara says. But then there's a postscript to the story. The following year, the Almighty gave him his reward. What happened? In his flock, amongst his cattle, a red cow, a red heifer, was born. Now, red heifers are not actually so unique. You see them in Texas, right? The Texas Longhorns, that's a red cow. They brought it in from Spain. The notion of having a red cow, that's itself is not such a phenomenon. What is unique about it is that the red cow is entirely red, doesn't have any white hairs or any black hairs. And Dama ben Asina, whoa, how would you know it? Amazing. A year later, after he has this episode, a perfectly pristine red cow is born in his flock. And again, the same rabbis come and they start negotiating with him. And he tells them, I know that this is something very important for the Jewish people. You need this. And I know I can charge whatever in the world. There's no price that you'll refuse me. But I only want to charge you whatever money I lost from the deal of last year. I recognize that this red cow was born to me in merit of me honoring my father. Therefore, I'm only going to charge either 600,000 or 800,000 gold coins for my profit. And they did. They bought it, and the story is over. And the Talmud comments that we see someone who is not commanded, i.e., this is a non-Jew. He doesn't have Torah. He has the 7 mitzvos. Amongst the 7 mitzvos is not honoring your parents. Well, we see if the non-Jew... Well, we see if the non-Jew who is not commanded to honor his parents, if he goes so far as to even forfeiting so much for their honor, how much more so someone who is commanded? That's the end of the Gemara. Now there's two critical. Go ahead.
I was taught, or maybe I'm thinking wrong, that the next red heifer will be when the Mashiach comes. Is that true?
There is a source that says that there's 10 red heifers, and 9 of them have already existed, and one of them is times of Mashiach. There is a source for that. Okay, so I want to examine this Gemara, because I think there's at least 2 questions, 2 obvious questions. The Gemara began with a pursuit of a definition, of guidelines, of boundaries. How far does honoring your parents have to go? And I'm sure over the course of history, there were lots of people who honored their parents sufficiently. That's a safe assumption. Yet, after searching high and low to find someone that really embodies this principle, the best you could find is an idolater living in Ashkelon. You couldn't find some nice Jewish boy who honored his father and his mother sufficiently? Seems really strange. Why is it when we're seeking for a model of someone who upholds this mitzvah properly, the only thing we find, or the only example we present, is a non-Jew, an idolater? That's one question. Another question. The individual, Dama ben Asina, he recognized that the reward for honoring his parents is that he merited to have a red heifer. And it seems like from the Talmud that the Talmud agrees with that. It's not just that he said that, it's actually published for posterity in the Talmud because it's true. Why is this an appropriate reward for honoring parents to merit to have a red heifer? What's the connection between the two? That's 2 questions, I think, that will help us open up this subject. I want to look at another source about the red heifer. The verse in Exodus, right after the Jewish people left Egypt 7 days later, they split the sea. And immediately after that, they traveled to a place called Mara. Mara was where they didn't have any water. And Moshe is shown a stick or a branch. He throws it into the water. The previously bitter waters sweeten. That's the verse in chapter 15, verse 25 of Exodus. And I'll read you the whole verse. Vayitzak al Hashem, and he cried out to Hashem. Vayareu Hashem eitz. Hashem showed him a tree or a branch. Vayashleich al hamayim, and he threw it into the water. Vayimtuku hamayim, and the waters sweetened. And then the verse ends. Sham sam lo chok v'sham nisahu. There it was placed for them a chok, umishpat, and a law, and there they were tested. What the verse cryptically says is that in this place, in Mars, 10 days after leaving Egypt, 40 days before Sinai, remember Sinai is actually 50 days after they left Egypt, so 40 days before Sinai, the Jewish people already received a chok, a law, and a mishpat, and a law as well. What are these laws that the Jewish people received prior to Sinai? So all the commentaries discuss that. There's a Talmud in Sanhedrin. The Talmud tells us on page 56b that they received the laws of Shabbos, the laws of jurisprudence, of dinim, and the laws of honoring parents. Other sources, namely Rashi in his commentary on that verse, he takes out honoring parents and he puts in its place red heifer. So according to at least one source, red heifer, that mitzvah preceded Sinai. According to another source, that the mitzvah that preceded Sinai was honoring parents. Again, we see another connection between those two mitzvahs, honoring parents and red heifer. And interestingly, we see that there's something about this that is so critical and so pivotal and so crucial and so vital that it even needs to come ahead of time. Even before Sinai, before you learn something, before you learn the bulk of the mitzvahs, or at least you begin to learn the mitzvahs, there's certain preliminaries. There's the 101. This is some stuff you got to know. The prerequisites for Sinai are these mitzvahs, or at least the connection between these two mitzvahs. So I think we have a list of 4 or 5 questions about the red heifer. What's the deal with the red heifer? What's the meaning behind it? How is it related to honoring parents? How is it related? Why is it so important to come before Sinai? And I want to suggest an idea that will hopefully answer all those questions, but also that will launch us into a new understanding in mitzvos at large. Red heifer is a chok. It's an edict. It's a mitzvah that you don't understand, or you can't possibly understand it fully. You can't possibly understand it fully. Now, this is an exception. Most mitzvahs, you indeed can understand, and you can understand it much more deeply. Solomon was upset that he didn't understand this mitzvah. Other mitzvahs he did understand. And there's books written to explain meanings behind mitzvahs. You get to the chok, and you have to raise up your arms and say, well, we don't know the reason. God has his reasons, we don't understand it. But the general theme, the general thrust is that mitzvos can be perceived by human intellect. But there's an entire section of mitzvos that you'll never understand, no matter what you do, because it's limited to God's intellect. And human intellect does not interface with it. And the classic example of a mitzvah that you do understand, what's the most easily understood mitzvah? What's the mitzvah that makes the most sense? Well, that's honoring your parents. Think about it. Who do you owe more appreciation and gratitude towards than your parents? If not for them, you wouldn't exist. They brought you into this world. They took care of you from day one. It's a mitzvah that makes so much sense for you to at least do the minimum in payback, in appreciation. It's the most logical mitzvah, the mitzvah that connects the most to human intellect, right? They brought you to this world. Of course, you ought to honor and respect them. And indeed, this mitzvah is so universally understandable. It's so intimately connected to human intellect outside of, so to speak, the spiritual, religious realm, that even a non-Jew, Dama ben Asina, what does he know? He doesn't know Torah. He's an idolater. How did he recognize to honor his parents? He got there on his own. Because you don't need Torah to understand every mitzvah. You just need intellect to understand some. And no mitzvah represents the class of mitzvos that is most understandable outside of Torah, outside of God, than honoring parents. And if you remember, going all the way back to Genesis, we have Jacob and Esau. And Jacob, of course, is the forebearer of the Jewish people, and Esau is the forebearer of all our enemies. We have Torah, he doesn't have Torah. Well, there was one mitzvah, the sages tell us, that Esau excelled at. He was, in fact, even better than Jacob at one mitzvah: honoring your parents. And there may indeed, just as a little sidebar here, the Talmud tells us that your parents bring you to this world. Your rabbi brings you to Olam Haba. For someone like Esau who loved this world, it's much more natural for him to appreciate his father. Jacob is someone who's living for next world, and therefore this world, it's almost an impediment to what he really wants. It's much harder for him to appreciate his biological parents, and it's much easier for him to appreciate his teachers, because his teachers bring him to the world that he really wants. That's a sidebar. But regardless, we see that Esau doesn't have Torah, yet he has this mitzvah. Mitzvah is accessible outside of Torah, outside of God. Dama ben Asina, he's a non-Jew, yet he excels in this mitzvah. So that's one class of mitzvahs we understand. Now, on the entirely opposite end of the spectrum, well, that's the red heifer. You don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to you. No matter how much you think, you can't get it. Only Moshe who was able to understand it. If you want to understand more about that, just as another sidebar. Sorry for so many sidebars. I spoke yesterday. I gave a Parsha class, and I gave a whole explanation as to why Moshe was indeed able to understand that. Check that out on the Parsha podcast. Close sidebar. So, no, we can't understand it. So why do we do it? The only reason why you do it is because it's an act of faith. It's an action not supported by our reason, save for the fact that God instructed. So when you do the mitzvah of honoring your father, it's the most stacked towards a reasonable, in your head, reason to do this. And then on the entire other end of the spectrum, it's a mitzvah that you're doing entirely, it's an action because God tells you to do it. And your brain, your mind is not with you. You're acting with your body, so to speak, but your mind is just receptive to God. It's taking the back seat. It's saying, I don't understand this, only God understands that.
Are the laws of kosher also?
Well, yes. All the chokim, they all fall under that category. I want to suggest that what's the purpose of a mitzvah? The purpose of a mitzvah is to become a great person. Of course, the mitzvahs together build us from the ground up. It changes who we are. It is an opportunity for someone to connect to God and to go against our predispositions. Humans are not predisposed to connect to God because we have a body, we have a Yetzer Hara. Comes along a mitzvah, and the mitzvah says, okay, do this, follow this activity, and you could reverse the conditions that you are presently in, your default. You could reverse this trend away from God and start heading towards God. When someone does a mitzvah based solely on the fact that God says to do it, I don't understand it, it's just my action, my mind is not participating, such an action crafts and forms and molds a person. And who does that? Well, that's God. The person is saying, I don't know how to build a perfect human. I'm not doing this mitzvah because it makes sense to me. I don't understand it. But I know that God understands it. And God told me, if you want the exact formula, the exact manual to achieve your greatness, do X, Y, and Z, 613 steps in this process, and you follow them to the T, you listen to the doctor's orders, and you'll arrive at the end result. That attitude is critical to doing mitzvahs. If someone does a mitzvah only because they understand it, they're not actually changing who they are. They would have maybe done it otherwise. It makes sense to them. There's no change in direction. There's no reorientation, reframing of who you are. You're exactly the same way you were. You would have done it without a mitzvah. Daman ben Asina didn't have a mitzvah to do it. He did it anyhow. Esau, he didn't have Torah. And he did it anyhow. That's not a mitzvah that changes a person. What changes a person? Where I wouldn't have done it, I would have done something else. Yet I chose to not do that something else because of God, because of Torah. I'm changing. I'm going the opposite, against what I am inclined to do. My brain tells me, this is ridiculous. You're taking a red cow and you're slaughtering it in the temple and burying it and burning it outside the temple. And this doesn't make any sense. There's no reason to it. And you say, no, I'm doing it because God is smarter than me. God has a more advanced brain. God created me and told me how to perfect myself. That is a mitzvah where someone actually changes. And therefore, it teaches us, I think, a critical point here. Just simply put, to understand why we do this mitzvah. That was our first question. We don't understand it. Well, that's sometimes precisely the point. Now, granted, most mitzvahs you do understand. But it's important for you to realize that even the mitzvahs that you do understand, it has to follow the model of the mitzvahs that you don't understand. If two people do a mitzvah, one of them does it because God tells them to do it. The other person does it because, well, I would have done it anyhow. Which one of them is more apt to change? If someone would have done it anyhow, you're not acting against your nature. You're not changing anything. You're just acting the way you were programmed to act, or you were inclined to act anyhow. You're not changing. If you do a mitzvah because God tells you to do the mitzvah, then you can unearth the tremendous power of the mitzvahs themselves. Torah is God's manual for living. It's the ways through which we can become great. To fully achieve that, there has to be a realm where we say, I don't know, God knows, and I'm going to rely on Him. I'm going to ignore what I think. I'm going to stop, kind of put the brakes on my own predispositions and understandings. We're going to halt that for a little bit, and we're going to say, okay, God, you tell me how to act so I know how to change. This is a critical principle of all of Torah. So in a sense, in the mitzvah of red heifer is something that's crucial for all of Torah, because it really shows us why we do mitzvahs, what the objective of mitzvahs is. This is so important, it has to be told to us before Sinai. Before Sinai, you're about to get the greatest gift ever conveyed on humanity, Torah from God. This is alchemy. It's how to take lead, how to take a human that's not great and turn him into gold. That's what Torah is. However, there is a precondition to that. It's necessary for someone to say, let's learn the lesson of the red heifer. Let's understand how and why mitzvahs change us. That is a precondition for everything else that's to come. Of course, the Almighty could have found a way to shoehorn these other three mitzvahs in later. but it's important for it to be told to us earlier. Dama ben Asina, he does a great mitzvah of honoring his parents, honoring his father. Amazing. He's the prototype. And what is his reward? Ironically, the reward goes to the opposite end of the spectrum. It's not something that's logical. It's something that's entirely illogical to human brains. What's the lesson? What's this connection? We see again and again that honoring parents is connected with red heifer, even though they seem to be opposites. The answer is, Dama ben Asina, you think that the mitzvah that you do is because it's logical to you. You're after all Gentile, right? What do you know about Torah? Nothing. So why are you doing the mitzvah? Because, well, it makes sense to me. My parents helped me. My parents brought me to this world. There's a lot of logical reasons to do that. Well, what's your reward? What's the real reward for every mitzvah? What is the power of the mitzvah that is truly transformational to change a person? Here's your red heifer. Even the things that are most skewed to the logical, so to speak, side, we have to realize that what really changes us is the fact that we're doing what God tells us to do, and we're the blank slate. We don't really understand God's crafting and forming and molding us to become great people. I want to take this a step further. The Mishnah tells us, Lo hamidrash hu ha'ikar, ela hama'aseh. Not the study is what's the most important. Rather, it's the action. We have part of the corpus, part of the mitzvos. There's some of them that are intellectual, midrash, study, and there's some of them that are activity-based. Says the Mishnah in Chapters of the Fathers, Lo ha-midrash hu ha'ikar. Not the midrash, not the study, is the ikar, the most important, primary objective. Ela hama'aseh, rather the action, doing. The Talmud goes a step further. Tachlis chachma, the goal of chachma, of wisdom, tshuva u'maisim tovim, is repentance and good deeds. Again, the chachma, the wisdom, well, that's in your head. The deeds, well, that's in your body. What's the objective? What's the end goal of the intellectual connection to Torah? Is the physical activity where someone does something, good deeds. Now, you have something to say?
I'm kind of lost, and I'll ask you a question. Why? When you can obey the laws of Shabbat, and you can, which is a hoax. You can refrain from certain things, like shotness. It's a hoax. How do you do the red heifer, though? How is that a mitzvah to us when there's only been 9 ever?
Well, it's not applicable to us today, but the lesson is certainly applicable today.
So we take a lesson.
So
you're saying the action. What action can we take from the red
Well,
heifer?
the lesson is to take the action.
There is no action, though.
Well, yes, of course, but we see the primacy of action over thought. That's the lesson.
Okay.
That even when you do something based out of thought, like the honoring your parents, the important part is the action.
To do it.
To do it, yes.
But if you can't do it, how does it become a mitzvah?
Well, it teaches you a lesson.
Well, we can't do sacrifices either. Because the temple is not there.
Think about it this way. In every mitzvah, there is an aspect of red heifer in it. Every mitzvah, forget about red heifer itself. Let's take red heifer as an idea. In every mitzvah, even in the mitzvah of honoring your parents, there's an aspect of the red heifer in it. That you're doing it just because God tells you to do it.
I get you.
Well, you mean that there's an obligation.
Yeah, and it's something you do and you're not thinking about, I'm doing it because X, Y, Z, I'm doing it because God told me to do it.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of take this to the next logical step here. We talk about Mussar here. So this is after all, the Mussar Monday, right?
Yes.
You learn about good character. You learn about midos. You learn about how to behave. You learn about how to become great. You learn about how to transform yourself, how to recreate yourself. So when is the Mussar study? When is the primary Mussar learning? What I'll tell you is it's not from 7 to 8 on Mondays.
Right.
It's from 8:30 when you're done
Right.
till next week at 7:30 you come back.
Absolutely.
Now you're learning. Well, learning is the first step. That's, so to speak, the intellectual aspect of it. But that's not the most important thing. The ma'aseh, the action is the most important thing. That's what we learn from Red Heifer. And therefore, it's important for us to take, and this is, I think it's a little scary, because, we think, well, we study Torah. What could be greater than that? Nothing is greater than that. But, and I'll prove this with, I'll try to prove this with some sources here, that learning something in your head is not enough. That is, unless that's actualized, it stays in your head. What good does it do for you? I would even argue that it does bad for you. And hear me out. That's a shocking statement. How could Torah be bad? Torah is the best thing that ever existed. Well, maybe if someone studies Torah without taking the lesson of the red heifer with him or her, and not is saying, I'm studying it only based on academic, it's only academic. Well, who are you cutting out of your world? You're cutting God out of the world. You're saying this is not godly. This is not God's instructions how to become great. This is some sort of exercise. This is some sort of intellectual pursuit. How could that be a good thing? How could it be okay to take God and cut him out of Torah?
It's an ego.
Which is the opposite of faith. Yeah.
So if somebody's Torah ignorant,
Yes.
but out of instinct does all the right things, does that not make him a righteous person? Because he does.
How could he do that? That's a good point.
It's just he knows the difference between right and wrong, and he does all the right.
How does he know what the right and wrong? Do you know what
he
the?
just instinctively knows it.
Do you know what the? But what he thinks right and wrong might be different. Remember, the Romans thought that if a child was deformed, it's right to
Right,
euthanize
but,
them.
What I'm saying, right or wrong, he instinctively does.
He instinctively
what is
does
right
Torah?
by the Torah, even though he doesn't know Torah.
That's
So
impossible.
so he would do the red heifer. You're saying?
No.
You're right. You're really
I'm
kosher,
No, I'm
right?
saying he would honor his parents. He wouldn't commit murder.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's.
He you know.
We have 7 Noahide mitzvos. Do you know what's unique about those 7 Noahide mitzvos? Says Maimonides, these are the mitzvos that someone could understand on their own. It's to be a good moral person.
But if he goes beyond the 7 Noahide laws, and just instinctively obeys, like
He does the red heifer.
mitzvot.
That would be impossible.
That is
No,
impossible.
I said just
You wouldn't
100. I
even
didn't
know
say
what they were.
613. Just 100.
Well, you know what's
Well-
said in the Midrash with Elimelech and Ryan, arguing the issue, which is more important, study of Torah or doing good deeds, and at the end of the negotiation, obviously doing good deeds is the more important, but you know what good deeds are, how to accomplish them without studying Torah.
That sounds like what you're quoting the Talmud in Kedusha on page 40b,
Perhaps.
where they were standing in the Aliyah-based Nitzah Belud, and Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva. That's the Talmud, and they were arguing what's more important, to study or to learn or to act.
And thus you have to study.
So initially they said to act, but then finally they said study because study brings to action.
Right.
One leads to the other.
Right, but study without action is only half of the game.
Well, it's not only half the game; it's negative.
Yeah.
That's the point I want to bring. I want to make the claim
Not
here.
applying the study, so
Well,
we're
that
good.
makes sense.
It's not just you're applying. The study itself is actually injurious. That's what I want to make a claim, and I want to try to prove that.
It's so self-oriented. You're
Yeah.
feeling good. I know
Yeah.
everything.
Right.
But you haven't
Right.
used it.
Right.
So
See, like I think I'm a good Jew because I'm going to 5 classes a week. But that's not. I'm a good Jew because maybe what I do outside the class.
I don't believe we're here to learn. We're here to do.
well, we're here to learn and we're here to do. But
Yeah,
there's
learn
2
to
kinds
do.
of learning.
We're here to do.
And this is the point I want to stress here. There's 2 kinds of learning. There's a kind of learning which is the holiest, greatest thing in the world, a learning that will bring about to action. And there's a kind of learning where someone cuts God out of the equation, says, I want to learn just for learning's sake, and I do not want to obey it. Well, that's actually a bad kind of learning. It's a bad kind of intellectual pursuit.
Right.
So I want to go look a little bit towards next week's parsha.
Well, there's something in one of the parshas about we will obey and then we will hear.
Yes, of course, with the run up to Sinai.
Right. So
That's the same lessons. Good point. Because first we have the red heifer, which we're just obeying. We don't understand it at all, and only then we shall listen. That's a great point. And that was right before Sinai. So it kind of it does dovetail nicely that before Sinai, it's important for us to realize that even what we hear, even what we understand, we first have to say we're obeying it.
Oh, I see. Because they hadn't even heard it yet, so they had to obey it first.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what's the prime example of obeying without understanding?
Red heifer.
Red heifer. That's a good point. I got to add that to my notes. That the Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do, we will listen. That's exactly like the red heifer. Good point. I want to look at next week's parsha. Go ahead.
The red heifer is only when you have a temple, right?
Yes.
So there was no temple,
There's a tabernacle.
but that was after the Mount Sinai, was it not? That was
Yeah, but the
after
commandment was given before Sinai. Yes.
The came of the red heifer was given before Mount
Mhm.
Sinai. So we comprehend that even though we don't know what it is.
Well, we comprehend the fact that we do stuff without understanding.
If,
Okay, so go ahead.
okay, you can't go on the Temple Mount because there's no red heifer. So how can we rebuild the temple before there's another red heifer?
Okay, so there's two answers to that question. The Talmud in Sukkah tells us that the big problem is not, well, we find a red heifer and slaughter it. That's not a problem. Get the red heifer. What's the problem? Go to Texas and find one that's perfectly red. Right? The bigger problem is that how do we find someone who is totally pure to get the whole thing started? Because to begin with, you have to have someone who's pure. So the Talmud has two angles to answer that question. According to one opinion, what happens is that there's a child who's raised in total seclusion. And he is raised in a venue where it's impossible for him to become impure. And therefore, he's going to be, so to speak, the guinea pig who's going to get the whole thing started. He'll be the pure one who's going to make everyone else pure. That's one kind of strand of understanding. Alternatively, the Talmud does say that tumma hutra b'tzibur, which means that if 51% of the Jewish people are impure, then the laws of purity with regards to going into the temple are temporarily suspended. And therefore, according to that, if tumma hutra b'tzibur, if tumma, impurity, is permitted, if it's amongst the public, if it's amongst the majority, then you wouldn't have a problem to begin with.
Okay.
Because only once 51%, only you have to have 51% of the community to be pure in order for there to be a problem with impurity.
And 100% are impure now because...
Right, so then you wouldn't have the problem, right? Yes.
They had a movie about that,
A
about
series.
the red heifer at the JCC, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And there were twins. One was pure and one was impure. And they killed the pure one.
Is there humans?
Yeah.
Or twin cows?
I don't know. I don't remember. But there was a man who had a young man who had to greet the heifer, the red heifer.
Uh-huh.
And I believe he was killed. And then they substituted the impure twin. Or maybe I'm making this up, but
Maybe I'm making it up.
There is a story with a guy who had a red heifer. This is not the human's not killed. It's the red heifer.
Oh, okay.
And he took a yoke and put it on the back of the cow before the rabbis got there. Little baby red heifer. The verse says it cannot have a yoke on its back. And this guy says, I'm going to outfox the rabbis. I'm going to put the yoke on quickly before they get here. They'll never know the difference. Mm-hmm. And they came and they inspected the animal and said, sorry, this is ineligible. You lost all your money. He's like, well, how'd you know? And he said, well, actually, we have a way to find out whether or not there was a yoke ever placed on its back. There's 2 hairs on the back neck of the cow that are sticking up. You place anything on it, even once, it's like he loses his virginity. That's a, I don't know if that's the same story as the movie, but
There was a TV series, a short mini-series, based on the whole story
Yeah.
of the pure child and her red heifer. It was out about 2-3 years ago. It didn't go all the way, but it was based on that whole series of things, and I was curious as to how far it would go. But it was
yeah, it's a Gemara. If I remember, it's a Gemara in Sukkah in the 20s. I can find the Gemara if you want to research it further.
Okay.
Feel bad for the guy, right? It's like it's the ultimate homeschooling. Okay, so let's look a little bit here at the next week's parsha. Next week's parsha, we meet one of the strangest characters in all of Torah, Bilam, or Balaam, pronounced in English. This is someone who is a great prophet, a prophet on par with Moshe. However, he utilizes his powers for evil, namely for trying to curse the Jewish people amongst a bunch of other misdeeds. And in fact, the whole week, next week's parsha tells the whole story of Bilam's failed attempts to try to curse the Jewish people. Ultimately, he comes up with a scheme that results in many, many Jewish dead. Now, I think this is a prime example of this tension that we found here. Bilam, the verse tells us, is Yodea Da'as Elyon. He knows the Da'as, the knowledge of God, the lofty knowledge. Bilam's problems do not stem from his intellectual realm. He knows God's knowledge. Well, think about what kind of statement that is coming from the Torah. Yet we see that his behavior is heinous. And I think he's the prime example of someone who specifically because he had great intellect, he had great knowledge, he had, so to speak, the Torah of the mind, that led him down the path of corruption. Let's build this story out. First of all, the Talmud asks the question, why was someone as corrupt, as rotten as Bilam, why was he given prophecy? And the Talmud says, in the future, the Jewish people are going to be recognized as being God's people. We're going to have all the spoils. And the nations are going to come to God and say, it's not fair. Why is it not fair? Well, the Jewish people, they had Moshe, the greatest prophet ever. And he was the one who led them towards the right path. If we had someone like Moshe, we too would be like the Jewish people. That's why we have Bilam. Because Bilam was indeed like Moshe. He's the equivalent amongst the non-Jews of Moshe. So God will tell the non-Jews, well, sorry, that excuse won't work. You actually had someone like Moshe. And look what you did. Look where it brought you to. That's what the Gemara says. Now, we see that obviously there is a need to give prophecy to a Gentile. Because you have to have someone who's the equivalent of Moshe, or else there's a decent claim that the non-Jews have that we could have been like the Jewish people. Fine. But why give it? If you have to give the prophecy to a Gentile, at least find someone who's not as corrupt as Bilam. If you have to give it to a non-Jew, sure, fine. Find someone who's more righteous.
Well, he wasn't the only non-Jewish.
Yes, he wasn't the not only Jewish prophet, but he's the only non-Jewish prophet as great as Moshe. If there's a need to do it, give it to someone who is at least moral and upstanding. I want to suggest that the sequencing here is off. It wasn't that Bilam was corrupt and rotten, and specifically Bilam was given prophecy. No, Bilam was fine. Because he was given the great prophecy, he had, so to speak, the Torah without the red heifer, so to speak. He had the knowledge, but he didn't have the action. Therefore, he became corrupt. And this goes back to our central thesis, that there's a tremendous danger of studying intellectually alone and not applying it. It actually is worse. It's injurious. It's deleterious. It makes you're better off not studying if the studying is not going to lead you to action. The Talmud tells us, and this is, I think, the best proof. No further proof is needed to this principle. Zacha, if someone is meritorious, na'asis lo sam hachayim. The Torah is compared to an elixir of life. However, the word elixir or potion is sam. Sam in Hebrew, sam. Sam can also mean poison. Well, which one is it? Says the Talmud, it depends. If someone's zacha, if someone is zacha, if they're meritorious, it's samachayim, it's an elixir of life. If it's lo zacha, if he's not meritorious, it's na'asis lo sam hamaves, it becomes a potion, a poison of death. What this says is that Torah, i.e. intellectual greatness, is a great amplifier of action. If someone is righteous in their action, then the Torah is an elixir of life. It's the best thing ever. If someone is corrupt in their behavior, then ironically, the Torah is actually worse off for them because it amplifies the bad behavior and it becomes a poison of death for them.
What about the person or the people who are somewhat righteous and they're working on becoming better? I mean, they've done some corrupt things and they're working on becoming better. How do you classify them?
Well, first of all, I don't classify anyone. I'll leave that to God to classify.
Oh, okay. In the
But
Torah, though.
yes. But the idea is where they're heading. The Talmud says someone could be a sinner their whole life. If they repent on the last day of their life, they are right away ushered into Gan Eden, into Olam Haba. So it's, the Almighty is the only one who really judges. We don't judge people. Only the Almighty can judge people. And the Almighty judges people based upon all the circumstances and all the consequences and all the aspects of their life. Okay,
Did
I want
you say Olam? The
Olam Haba, yes.
Okay.
That's a nickname, a code name. It means the next world. So we talk about paradise or Olam Haba.
That's right.
We talk about reward and punishment. That's Olam Haba.
Your ride's here. Oh, my ride?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's early today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, Mr. Korn.
Yeah.
I'll see you tomorrow night.
Now, may I ask something?
Yes, go ahead.
Who decides? I know God decides,
Mhm.
but what do you call God when He's deciding this? When He just makes His decision about the Olam Haba?
Everybody.
People.
What do you mean, who he decides?
Well, okay, when you repent at the very end, you're repenting to Hashem.
Of course, yes. Repent, the word in Hebrew for repent means return. Return to God.
Return, okay.
Teshuvah, yes. Teshuvah means repent, yes.
Okay.
Does it go into any of the psychology as to why a person would be so knowledgeable about Torah yet?
Well,
Why?
I think, and this might be a crude example, but I think it does bring up the point. They in the Nuremberg trials, they actually gave IQ tests to all these horrific mass murderer Nazis. Turns out that almost all of them had genius level IQs. So the question is, how does someone with genius level IQs commit such horrific atrocities? Well, maybe someone who's corrupt and then they have the intellectual greatness that actually amplifies their corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And therefore makes them even more corrupt.
That's true.
And I read where Hitler had 141 IQ.
Yeah, it's genius level IQ. No one questioned his intellect. What the question is his character, his behavior.
What did he do with it?
Yeah, and ironically, the intellect will exacerbate
Yeah.
the corruption.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're stupid, you're probably not going to be too horrific.
Right, and so Bilam was not stupid at all, and he became very, very horrific.
Where did you get that
You can be an idiot and still be a murderer.
Well, I
It's
mean,
hard, it's
when you
hard.
think about
But you
it,
can't.
But
Yeah,
you gotta
they
be
don't
pretty smart to be a
they don't
thief,
give you
though.
the-
I mean, you
the
really
death
gotta be
maybe a
penalty.
thief.
Gotta be
Yeah, you can be an
If
idiot
you're
and be a
an
murderer,
idiot
but it's
and
not
you
gonna be
murder,
extensive
they
because
don't
you
give
can't
the death
plan it.
penalty because if your IQ's like
Below 80.
60 or below 80 or, so they,
But the point being though, what you're saying though is, it takes a considerable degree of intelligence to put together the massive machine that murdered so many people.
Oh, yeah, that
You
I
don't
get.
do that with,
Yeah.
as an idiot.
Yes.
As a person with a 9-year-old intelligence.
Right.
Yes,
Not
of
gonna
course.
happen.
Right.
didn't Albert Einstein, pretty much refuse to, keep developing,
Well, Albert Einstein, he left
left Berlin,
Germany in,
right.
in 1933. He left
Right.
much earlier.
yeah.
I don't know, but we see that intellect alone for sure. Like that's the bottom line. Intellect alone is not going to lead you to you need to have, so to speak, the actions, the behavior that's going to change you. I want to conclude with another wrinkle that I think is really interesting, and that's the golden calf. The golden calf. We know that the golden calf happened a mere 40 days after the greatest experience in the history of humanity, the experience at Sinai. An entire nation of people that are able to ascend to the greatest heights of prophecy. And this is a nation that experienced 10 plagues in Egypt, splitting of the sea. They're eating manna every day, surrounded by constant miracles. They have the experience at Sinai. 40 days later, they sin with the golden calf. Now, of course, we're not talking about the details of the golden calf. That's a whole class on its own merit. What happened? What was the sin? Where did they go wrong? But the obvious question is, how is it possible for a nation that has achieved such great heights for them to descend to such terrible lows and to act in a way that's almost akin to idolatry? Whether it's exactly idolatry, what exactly they did is all the commentators trying to understand the details. But certainly it had an aspect of idolatry. How is that possible? So I think in continuation with our theme, we could say is that the people, yes, they had all these tremendous experiences and all these insights, but they didn't have action. They didn't have Torah. They didn't know how to take what they know and infuse it into a behavior. And therefore, they weren't able to capitalize on what they knew, and therefore what they knew, in fact, helped them become corrupt. If they didn't have Sinai, they wouldn't have done the golden calf. If they didn't have the great achievements of their intellect, they would not have descended to the lows of the golden calf. So let's bring this full circle. Rashi in this week's parsha, he connects the red heifer, which is a mother cow, to the golden calf, which is a baby cow. And Rashi says that these are actually connected. And he gives an example. Suppose you have a palace. In the palace, there is a maidservant. And she's there, and she's part of the maidservant quarters, palace of the king. And she has her child with her, and the child comes and soils the floor of the palace of the king. What does the mom do? The mom quickly comes and cleans up the mess. Similarly, you have the golden calf, the baby cow. The baby cow soils and corrupts the Jewish people. Who is going to fix that? Who's going to clear away the mess? Who's going to undo and rectify the sin? The red heifer. So now, simply put, we could say, well, this is a baby cow, this is a mother cow. Sure. But on a very deep level, we really understand a tremendous insight. The sin of the golden calf was the fact that they had all insight, all intellect, and no action. How do you fix that sin? With the red heifer, which is all action and no insight. And therefore, specifically what went wrong with the golden calf, where their mind was just replete with understanding, but they didn't have a way to actually, they didn't have Torah and a way to kind of bring that into the real world, to act upon what they knew. And that, like Bilam, and like the Nazis, and like bad people who take the Torah and turn the Torah into a poison of death, it led them astray. Comes along the red heifer and shows them how it's done. You have to have a component of the red heifer of doing a mitzvah for the mitzvah's sake, action, not relying on your own intellect, relying on God's intellect, all action, no intellect, and that's going to fix it. There are a few statements that I want to add to just complete this, and then one more, I think, foundational insight. You know, it's my last Mussar Monday here. I figure I gotta give you guys some memorable nuggets. The Talmud says a person should customize themselves to saying, is the Talmud in Brachos. A person yargil atzma, a person should get used to saying, Eini yodea, I don't know. Wait a minute. Isn't Torah about trying to acquire knowledge, acquiring Torah? Eini yodea, I don't know. Torah, after all, should be about we should become a people of the book, a people of knowledge. Yes, we're not trying to encourage ignorance. But it's important for a person to remember, Eini yodea, I don't know. That's how I approach Torah. I want to know from God. God, you tell me, and I'll behave based upon what you tell me, not going to give my own commentary, not that I'm going to do only the Torah that I understand. I'm going to do a dose of the red heifer that I don't know, and that's how I'll achieve my greatness. One source. I want to share with you another source which I found very powerful. A few weeks ago, the parsha we read about Moshe counting the Levites. What was unique about the counting of the Levites was that they counted from the age of 1 month. So little babies still in their bassinets are being counted. So Moshe tells God, how am I supposed to know how many Levites there are in the tents, how many little baby Levites? Am I going to go into every bassinet and every nursery room and start counting the babies? So God tells him, Ata aseh shelcha, you do your job. Ani e'aseh sheli, I'll do my job. And Moshe goes to the entrance of the tent. He does his job. He goes as far as he can fulfill. And God tells him how many babies there are inside the tent. I think this is a good motto. A good motto for understanding the objective of Torah. We do what we need to do. God tells us what you do, and you don't worry about how those dots connect. You can rely on God's intellect. He will do his. He is giving you a regiment, how to become great, the Idiot's Guide, by God, Torah. Do your job, follow the instructions, and he'll do his job. He'll make you great. And another axiom that we find several places in Jewish literature, famously about Nimrod. Who was Nimrod? Well, Nimrod appears at the end of Parshas Noach. He is the king of the Tower of Babel. And there's this really strange statement about Nimrod. Yodea et ribono. Nimrod knew his master. Umit kaven limrod bo. And intentionally rebels. And this is something that we're not used to hearing. Nimrod knew all about God. Well, if you knew about God, why are you rebelling? He intentionally rebelled. That was a phone. I like a phone ringing. So this is a great example. Nimrod was someone who wasn't lacking intellectually. He was lacking in his behavior. He knew God, all about God. And indeed, because he didn't inject that into change, into action, into behavior, therefore it led him astray. He was trying to rebel against God. I want to share with you a quick little nugget where the objective of tonight's talk is to contrast Torah, intellectual understanding, insight, with mitzvos, actions, doing, fulfilling, working. Perhaps we could say, when someone understands something, the intellect, that's the seat of the soul. The action, That's the seat of the body. Which one of those is most important? Well, obviously, the soul is more important. However, which one of those demands us that we change? That's the body. We have a perfect soul and an imperfect body. Those two are going to harmonize. The only question is, which one is going to change which? Is the body going to defile the soul, make the soul lower, or is the soul going to uplift the body, make the body higher? Of course, the soul is the objective. Torah, intellectual knowledge, is the objective. However, our procedures, our growth is done with the body. By changing the body, uplifting the body, doing mitzvos, the body becomes par, so to speak, with soul. Now, par will be great, but it becomes more soul-like progressively, and therefore the harmony that we create with our body and soul is changing the body to make it mold the soul and not, God forbid, the other way around. And I don't want people to walk out today with the misunderstanding that, oh, well, Rabbi Wolbe just said we don't need to study Torah. Because that would be a grave misunderstanding of what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that there's a way to study Torah. There's a correct way to do it, and there's an incorrect way to do it. The correct way to do it is as exemplified by the red heifer. This was so important. Before we got any Torah, learn this lesson. Red heifer. Do. Find a way to, whatever you know, do. Whatever you understand, implement. Whatever's in your brain, in your mind, find a way to migrate it towards your heart, towards your body, towards your understanding. If you don't have Torah, if you don't learn anything, you're doomed to fail, because then you don't even have a head start. Of course, you start with Torah, but what kind of Torah? The kind of Torah that will engender action. Torah is indeed greater because Torah brings to action. There is a certain kind of Torah that's the elixir of death, that's the potion of death, that's the poison of death that you want to avoid. That's what Bilam did, and that is a grave danger. However, Torah, of course, is the greatest thing that we have, and it's our ticket and our tool towards greatness, provided that we don't forget the lesson of the red heifer, and we don't allow the Torah to remain relegated in our mind. We find a way to actually implement it in our body. And I will take any questions if there are any.
Yaakov, is Kabbalah a tool to link the mind, the body, and the soul with an action? Supposedly, it's supposed to enable you to get in closer touch with your spiritual self. Is it an avenue to enable what you're talking about?
Okay, so I'm going to say something a little controversial, okay? Ready?
Sure.
Everyone's okay with that? We're friends, right? After 3 weeks of Mussar Monday, I can say something controversial. I think Kabbalah is precisely the kind of study that could lead someone down the path towards Bilam. Yes, Kabbalah is Torah given to us by God. However, it's so powerful, it's so potent, and to make it applicable, you have to be so advanced. Yeah. It's very likely that it won't remain applicable. Yeah. Now, so let's kind of look at two different people. The average Joe, us, people in the room, right? We have to work on the meat and potatoes first. Let's try to fill our belly with that, and then we move on to Kabbalah. Because if we jump to Kabbalah, it's almost entirely likely that kind of Torah study is the Torah study that will lead us towards the elixir of death. Not to say that there's nothing wrong with Torah study, there's nothing wrong with us. We're not primed to have that advanced of a Torah study. That's, so to speak, trying to go to the batting cages, and instead of going to the one that throws 30, 40 miles an hour, going to the one that throws 105, right? The Aroldis Chapman. Yes, to go to that speed, right? You go there, great. If you hit it, it's that much farther, right? Look how far those people are hitting it. It's going so hard, right? You can hit it so much further. Yes, of course, but most of us will probably get hit by the pitch and get a hit in the head, right?
probably don't remember this exactly right, but isn't there a story about 3 guys?
4.
4? You tell me that, 'cause I don't remember.
Why are you telling his story?
4 people that went into the paradise?
Yeah, the garden.
Yes, yes.
Which is a euphemism for the mystical.
Yes, the orchard, right? That's the orchard.
And one dies. They were famous for that.
One dies, one goes crazy.
One goes crazy, one
Becomes a heretic.
Enough of this, and only one comes out unharmed.
And who is that?
I want to say Akiva.
Rabbi Akiva for you and me.
Rabbi Akiva.
Yes, that's Rabbi Akiva.
It's
Because
not bad for a reform guy.
oh, this is a non-denominational.
You know, I was.
That's the Talmud in Khadija.
But the point being that even amongst the very worthy and very knowledgeable, it's a dangerous place to be. I liken it to being the upflowing and if you don't have roots down in the ground,
Right.
you can go anywhere.
Yes. So let's kind of look at the
dangerous
building,
place to
right?
go, right.
The action, that's maybe the foundation. The Torah is, so to speak, the building.
Right.
And then like all the way on top of the building, you have this antenna that's super wavy and super precarious. That's your Kabbalah, right? Let's first work on the foundation and building and build floor after floor before we get to 500 floors to put up our antenna.
I have been to Kabbalah classes. I don't know what they're talking about. Wait, I'm not finished yet. And I got people behind me going, yeah, that's right, correct. I'm going, what are you talking about? It's way over my head, and they're going great.
Yeah.
There's
Have you seen that?
Well, I felt a little bit like.
there is a Rambam, Maimonides, in the end of chapter 4 of Hilchos Yesod Torah, of the laws of the foundations of Torah, where Maimonides, the first four chapters are what he calls the paradise, which means the orchard. That's said orchard, and he says these are the most important things. However, first learn everything else, and first fill your belly with the meat and potatoes, with all the Talmud, become an expert Talmud, then come back to me. Basically, what he says. So kind of to answer your question, for the right person, for someone who's there, they should learn it.
But
Someone who's not there, they absolutely shouldn't.
isn't Kabbalah something that you study, not something you learned? Isn't it something like a teacher?
Yeah, the
You,
word
for
Kabbalah.
instance, telling us.
The word Kabbalah means acceptance. What it means is that it's the last realm of oral Torah. It was never written down. Unlike all other parts of oral Torah that were written down, this was not written down. You have some texts of Kabbalah, but Kabbalah itself was never written down. So it was written down in an encrypted way. You cannot understand it unless you have a teacher that you can accept from. Does that make sense?
Yes, but
That makes sense.
not any rabbi can teach.
Right, because he has to accept it from his teacher, who accepted it from his teacher.
Have you gone through that?
I'm still working on the meat potatoes.
What about your older brother?
Yeah.
There's a lot of meat and potatoes.
Your older brother's gonna be 40.
Yeah, that's an arbitrary number.
There's-
That was only placed to get the little whippersnappers stop the whippersnappers from learning.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
an acronym also for Pshat.
Pshat, Remes, Drush, and Sod.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
Rashi,
yes.
And Sod is.
Yes, Sod is a secret.
What would be good reading for someone who has, like a basic knowledge of Judaism? Reform. I'm Reform. So, anyway, what would be the beginnings of a good reading, just to get a good general handle on the Torah? For instance, I have a Torah that's written in English, and it's got big letters in it, and I started reading it once and put it down.
If someone wants then the best single volume to understand kind of the big picture of Judaism, is a book by Ramchal. We spoke about him last week. The Way of God. The Way of God is a succinct single volume book on Jewish theology. It's written in the 18th century, way before Reformed, Orthodox, any of that, before there was any denominations. Kind of like, what do Jews believe based upon tradition.
How do you spell Ramchal?
Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim, Ramchal, or Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato, Luzzatto. We have a copy. We have a few copies of them here. It is a short volume. It goes through what Torah is, what God is, what reward and punishment is, what life's about, what's the objective, what's the purpose, what's the role of mitzvahs. It's a really fantastic. And if you have an interest in Kabbalah, you should know that work is an entirely work of Kabbalah, though you don't notice that it's Kabbalah. So it's Kabbalah without it being overtly Kabbalah.
Yeah.
So Kabbalah that we can understand. Yeah. So that's what I would advise for someone who wants to get like a big picture. You want to study, you want to kind of get into the nitty gritty. You read. There's a lot more books, of course, to read about that.
Doesn't Kabbalah also explains the relationship between the numbers of the letters?
Sure.
So, is it more like a explaining?
Well, I'm not an expert in Kabbalah, so I don't want to opine on Kabbalah.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what the Mishnah says.
Yes.
The Mishnah, what you're referring to is gematria.
Yes.
Gematria, that the Hebrew letters have numerical values, and that kind of underscore deep ideas about words in Torah and what they mean. So what the Talmud says, the Mishnah says in the end of, I think, the 5th chapter of Pirkei Avos. It's the end of one of the chapters, the last words of one of the chapters. I think might be the 4th paragraph. I think it might be the 4th or 5th chapter of Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah says, Gematrios parpiraos l'chachma. Gematrios are garnishments for wisdom. Suppose you have a cake, and then there's little sprinkles on top. So no one would just eat, okay, my kids would just eat the sprinkles. But, right, you don't just eat the sprinkles. But if you eat the cake, but if you have a cake, it's nice to have a few sprinkles on top, right? The wisdom itself is the cake. The gematria, that's the little sprinkles on top. That's the garnishments on top of the cake, on top of the entree.
That's what I'm interested in.
Just the garnishments?
Yeah. That's what I want to learn.
Okay.
What about the other stuff?
No. For the moment, that's really
So what I would advise you to do, if someone wants to do gematrios properly, there is a commentary in the Torah called the Baal HaTurim. The Baal HaTurim is written by one of the greatest giants of Jewish history. He was, if you remember, we spoke about halacha here, the son of the Rosh, Rabbi Yaakov ben Harash, who lived in the 13th century. Halacha that we have today is based primarily on his work. He wrote a commentary on the Torah, which is called the Baal HaTurim, the author of the Turim. And this is a commentary where he weaves in gematria into explaining the verses in the Torah. It's a very fascinating word. I'll give you an example, like what he says. He gives like a lot of allusions and understandings and illustrations. It's a very fascinating commentary. We don't have a copy of it over here. If someone wants to sponsor it, sponsorships are always available.
I think we got a sponsor over here.
Yeah, I think we got to say, yeah. So the Baal HaTurim, they published, the Art Scroll published a brand new translation. It's fantastic. And that is the place to go, because you go also, the way to do it, you don't want to just learn gematrias themselves. It won't get you really.
Right.
You learn Torah, and it's a commentary on Torah, then yes. Then it kind of gives you like a flavor. It gives you a flavor on Torah.
I think.
Say that again.
That's
Baal HaTurim. HaTurim. Right, not gematrias on yourself. You want to learn Baal HaTurim, yes. What you want to do is you read the verse in the Torah, and then you read the Baal HaTurim, and he'll kind of give this whole tapestry. It's beautiful. Yeah.
By Rabbi Avi Gold, or
You see,
that's just a commentary.
look,
Who wrote that?
you see,
Baal
that's
HaTurim.
what each letter.
Okay, this was a lot of fun. Any more questions?
You write
Thank you, Rabbi.
words.
Thank you. I look
Great
forward to
job.
see everyone
Great
tomorrow.
job.
Oh, thank
We're
you.
gonna
It's
miss you.
Let me
Oh,
put the name of that.
that's very kind.
The Baal HaTurim.
HaTurim, HaTurim.
HATURIM.
Okay.
Haturim.
HaTurim.
Is that his name?
No, I don't
Everything
know.
from Adam to Seth.
It's the Gematria. That's right.